In this video, we're going to go over a whole bunch of things that you can do with the text tool in Adobe Animate. We're going to start by going over the basics of the tool, which includes things like how to break your letters apart from a word and put them on their own layers, maybe add an outline, a gradient, warp them, change color, stuff like that. Then we're going to go into the basic movements of classic tween, motion tween, and shape tween. Next, we'll explore all the different transformations you can do with your letters, and then I'll end with all the filters. Let's go. All right, so obviously to get started, we are gonna need some text. So the text tool is right over here. Just click on it, and there's two ways to add text to the stage. One way is to draw a box. So I just clicked and started dragging out, and then you let go. And then in there, you can start typing your word. The better way is just honestly to just click on the stage, and then just this narrow one will come up. You'll type in your word, and then now no matter what you write, it's going to continue to go. So it kind of expands and adjusts to your word instead of the other way around. Okay, so now that we have our text, let's just go over to properties, and under object, this is kind of where all the regular stuff is to allow you to manipulate text. So your font, color, all that kind of stuff. But just know that you have to be highlighted. Like you have to highlight your word for any of it to work. If I'm just clicked beside it like this, and let's say I try and change the color, nothing is going to happen, okay? So you have to highlight your word, and then you can right here, this is where you can click under character and change your font. So I'm just going to, well, actually I'm just going to stay with that font. Down here is your size, so I can change this to, let's say 350, and it'll adjust. You can change your kerning, so if you slide this to the right, it'll separate your letters more, and if you slide it to the left, it's going to crunch them in. So that's kerning. Right here is obviously your color, so I'm going to just switch to red. And obviously you can see that it doesn't happen when it's highlighted, right? You're going to have to click off to be able to see what you have done, right? So if I highlight it again, I can go right down here, and this one is subscript. So if you have, let's say, like some of them written like this, you can click this and it becomes subscript, or this becomes superscript. So like a power in math, or just normal again. And then if we go down here, you can see some paragraph things, and that just adjusts things within your box. So let's say I just expand the box a little bit. If I click center align, it's not going to be for the whole stage. It's just going to be for this box. If we go up to the very top right here, this like color painting canvas thing, and click on that, and you can see here that right now it's a solid color that we have. And if I try to click on linear gradient, nothing happens. It stays as a solid color because right now we have our kind of original text. So let's take a look at what else we can do to this to have more control. Okay, so instead of just typing it and leaving it in this box, the next thing you can do is right click and then go down here to break apart, or control B. So when you do that, boom, it separates it into individual letters, but they're still in their like text boxes, right? So I can now click into this one and type something new in there because it's its own text box, okay? But if you want more control, like even more control, I'm gonna actually highlight all of them again like that. You can right click and break apart again. And now it turns them into essentially a graphic that we can manipulate in a lot more ways. Right now we have basics, like everything written on one layer here. I'm gonna keep that, but I'm also going to right click and duplicate it so that I can now take the duplicate layer and drag it down here, and then break up each of these letters onto its own layer over here. Okay, so to do that, you just go up to modify, down to timeline, and over to distribute to layers. And you'll notice that over here, besides basics copy, you can actually get rid of that now, just trash it. You can see that each of these, if I click the eyeball here, is one of the letters. Now, they might not show up in order though, so make sure you click the eyeball to see which one it is, because this one's I, for example, and this one's B. So before I move on, I'm just gonna name them all and then put them back in order. Okay, so now if we take a look down here, you can see we have two versions of the word basics. The first one here is our original basics title up top, and you can see when I click on the word basics, you can see all these like little dots that show up on every single letter. But if I click on just the B here, obviously it's just gonna show up like that on the B. Now, if I also click on the keyframe here for basics and they're all selected, I can move the entire word at the same time, like all the letters at the same time. To do that with basics here, I can just, with my selection tool here, I can click over in the white and draw a box around all of them and then move it together if I want. To move letters individually, if I want here, I can't be selected on the keyframe. I have to click somewhere else so it's not selected. And then I can still click on the word, on the letter B, and it's selected now. And I can move it separate from the whole word. For these ones down here, all you have to do is click on the keyframe of the B and you can move it and do the same thing. For either one, if you are not selected, so you can't be selected on it, it has to be like the A here where I'm not selected, or the B, like for basics, I can go to the edge with my selection tool and you'll see this little curvy line that shows up, and you can actually bend and like reshape your letters to be whatever you want. But again, if you've selected it, now that doesn't show up. So if I go down here, I can bend this B the same. And since I'm still not selected on this A, I can now tweak the A and do whatever I want there as well. Something else you can do while not being selected on letters is maybe go to your paint bucket tool and, pick a color. So I'll pick maybe a dark green like this, and you can just, use the paint bucket tool to change the color to whatever you want. You can also right click in here and change it to the ink bottle tool. And that will allow you over here to pick a stroke color, like so an outline. So I'm going to keep it at black and just make it a little bit smaller. So whatever you click on, it'll add that outline. So if I went smaller, you can see that it's smaller, and you can change the style and stuff here. So let's do it a dotted one, and then try again. So now it's, it was too big. So if I drop this right down, then you'll see the dotted one like that. If you want to apply a gradient to a letter, then just go back to your selection tool and pick on the layer that you want. So I'm going to do it to this S. Go up here to this kind of paintbrush thing here, the one that we talked about before. And now when it says solid color, you can pick linear gradient, radial gradient, or bitmap fill. If you click on linear gradient, you can see that that's going to be like just a straight line, like one color fading to another. To change your colors, just click on one of these two boxes, like double click on it. It'll bring up your color swatches. So you can change it to whatever you want. I'll change it to red. And you can do the same thing to this one, double click, I'll keep it at kind of a yellow. And if you want more control over what that looks like, if you go over here to your gradient transform tool and click on that now, you'll get this kind of slider thing here. And the middle allows you to move it. So you can have it, you can change where the color falls. The one at the top here is if you want to rotate it. So you want to have it go from, let's say, top to bottom or an angle or something. And then right here is where you can expand it to make it a little more gradual, or, like really harsh lines. So those are a few options right there. So if I go back to basics and I click on this S now, I'll put on a different gradient. So I'm going to change it to radial gradient, and let's just keep the same colors. But now when we go over to our gradient transform tool, you can see there's kind of a different thing. The middle is the same, so you can, move this around. If you click on that triangle, you can move kind of just where the center point is. So if you want it a little more to the side, or if you want it right in the middle. This one right here is to rotate it, but if it's in the middle, you're not going to see much. So maybe I'll just move this over. So if you rotate it, now you can see it kind of moving. And this one right here is to expand it out. So again, really harsh lines, or make them really blurred and blend into each other. So you can adjust it there. And then this one is to stretch it out. Okay, so if you want it to be like collapsed, or if you want it to be spread out. If I go back to my selection tool and then click on the eye down here, I'm going to show you one more under this right here, under color. We're going to go to bitmap fill. And in there, if you have any images, like you can kind of barely see it here. So this image is now showing within the eye. So maybe I'll just import a new image and maybe make it like this Batman one. And then I'll select it right here. So to change them, you just pick on it right there, and you can see that it kind of shows up. It would obviously work better if I used it for like the whole word. So let's see if I can click on this whole word and then go back in here and change it to bitmap fill and then to the Batman symbol, right? So you can see that it would fill all of the letters all at once. And then obviously if I click on the keyframe for the word basics again, and then go up to the color swatch thing here and change this from bitmap fill to linear gradient, you can see that it'll impact the entire word as well. All right, next we're going to look at the 3 main ways that you can animate your text by using classic tweens, motion tweens, and shape tweens. So for classic tweens, I'm going to use this A right here, but I'm also going to right click and break it apart. And you can see here that the A is on this layer and there's the keyframe for it. So I'm just going to right click and go up to the top to create classic tween. It's going to turn purple and add all these frames right here until 1 second. So if you do it that way, it'll go to exactly 1 second. And since I'm animating on 24 frames per second, 1 second is at 24 frames. Okay, so at that point, I'm now going to right click and insert a keyframe right here. You can also do it if you have the newest version right here. Right click and go keyframe right there, or just click on it if you've already selected that. And you can see now that it changed to a straight line with like an arrow. And all that means is this keyframe is where my animation is going to start, and this is where it's going to end. But since the A is in the same spot for both of these, it doesn't move. So I'm now going to go to this last keyframe and just move the A over to here. And then I'm going to go back to the start here. And if I push play, you can see that it goes from that spot to that spot. Starts here, ends here. But just like any other kind of journey, you can also have destinations in the middle. So I'm going to go to about the halfway point at 12 frames, and I'm going to add another keyframe, and I'm just going to move the A up here so that now it goes from there up to the top and then over to where we end. So it goes from here to here and then to the end. But if you notice that it moves pretty fast, and that's because the more frames you have in between your keyframes, the slower it's going to move. So we don't have many frames here in between, so it moved really fast. So if I take this keyframe, so I'm going to click on it so it turns blue, and then click on it again and drag it out to over here, then you can now see that there's more frames here. And if we play it again, you're going to see it's going to go fast to here and then slow the rest of the way there. So fast and then slow. On a side note, if you want to change what your letter looks like by doing any of these things, so adding an outline or changing the shape of it or a gradient or something, after you've already animated, you're going to have to go to your selection tool and then double click on the letter, which will bring you into like basically a new timeline here. And then you're going to have to apply your effects in here. So I'm just going to quickly click away. You notice I clicked away so it's not selected. And then I'm going to click on here to add an outline. And then maybe I'll just go to my selection tool here and tweak the A out like this. And then you'll go up here to click this little back arrow to bring you back to your main timeline. And now your A is going to look like that. But just know this only works if you break it apart at the start before you apply the classic tween. And the same goes for motion tweens, which we're going to learn next. Next, we're going to go over motion tweens using this B right here, which is on this layer. So all I'm going to do is right click on that keyframe, and I'm going to go create motion tween this time instead. And you'll see that that one turns yellow, not purple. And the same kind of rules apply. This is where it's going to start. This is where it's going to end. But this time you see that if I go to the end here, I don't have to add any sort of keyframe. I can just take this B and move it to the next spot. And you'll see this kind of dotted line show up. And that should be, there should be 24 of these dots to represent the 24 frames that are in here. For a motion tween, if you want to extend it, you can just click where you want to extend it to, and then add a keyframe at that point, and you'll see that it looks kind of different. It's a little bit of a different, like smaller looking keyframe thing, but the same rules apply. If I click in the middle here and I take the B and I slide it somewhere else, you're going to see that now 2 lines show up. This was the original right here. Then this is where the B is now. So it goes from this spot to there. And then this one over here is the last one, which was all the way over here. Now, the difference though between these two is that with motion tweens, you can change the path. So instead of it having to go in a straight line like this, if you see if I hover over this line, you get that little arrow with the curvy thing again. And if you click on the line now, you can drag it to bend it, to make it a curved path if you want. And if I go closer to this side, you can see that as these dots bunch closer, then that means it's going to move slower because it's having to move to all these keyframes in this short distance. But then as they spread out further, it's going to move faster. So I'm actually going to go like this and bunch them kind of over here a little bit more. And then I'm going to take this line and I'm going to bunch them like this. So it's going to go kind of fast here and then slow and then fast around there. Okay, so I'll show that as the example. So I push play, it goes a little bit slower and then fast out at the end here. Another way to add a new destination for motion tweens is to click on the frame where you want to move, and you can simply move your letter at that point or your object or whatever you have, and the line will bend to that spot. And just so you know, if you want to add frames to extend a motion tween, all you have to do is click between where you want to add them and just go F5, and that'll add more. You can see there's more dots, like more points here, which is more frames being added, which will make this section go even slower. If you want to take those away, then just go Shift and then F5, and it'll take the frames away. Okay, and then the third one I'm going to show you is how to do shape tweens with letters and text. So I'm going to go to the C layer here, and I'm just going to right click on there, and you can see that I can't create shape tween. That's the one that I want. That's because we have to right click and break it apart. Now for a shape tween, we can also, I'm going to show you in a second, we can also apply any of these characteristics to be able to animate, with a shape tween. So you can't really do that with these two because these two are dealing with kind of the shape being more like a symbol where you can't apply those. So now if I right click on C, I can go create shape tween, and you can see it turns orange and puts the keyframe again at 24 seconds. And I can do the same thing for a shape tween. I can still move it. So the same kind of rules apply. The C is now kind of zipping across there. If I want to add a new one, I can just go here and click there and then move it again. So now I've moved it, twice here. The difference is that now if I click on this one, again, if I go to the edge, since it's selected, if I go to the edge, I can't do anything. But if I click away and then go to the edge, I get that arrow with the little curved line, and I can actually, bend my letter like I showed you before, so that now you can see that it's going to go from a regular C. As it moves, it's going to change into that kind of messed up C that I made there, or whatever that is, and then it's going to morph back because I didn't do any changes to this one. And in the same way, I can now go to my paint bucket here and change the color. So I'll pick this, and if I click on that, you can see that it'll go from that and it'll change, colors. I can go to this first one, let's say, and remember, I can't be selected on it. I have to be clicked away, like clicked off. So you might have to go to your selection tool here and click away. And then I can, ink bottle tool, go in here and add my stroke onto it. If I actually click on the keyframe to select it, we can go up and apply a gradient. So if I go in here and I change it from solid, I can go to a linear gradient, and again, just pick, whatever colors I want the gradient to be. And then now if we watch that one animated, it's going to go from that gradient to the solid color and back. So you can manipulate all of those basic things when we are dealing with a shape tween, but not with motion tween or classic tween. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is all the ways that we can transform our text in Animate. So if you notice here, I've already broken this text apart and distributed each letter to its own layer over here. Plus, I've already added a classic tween to each of the first keyframes here. So now all I'm going to do is go over to like the 1 second mark, highlight all these ones, put a keyframe over here, and now we have all of them that are classic tweened all the way across. So all I'm going to do for each of these, I'm going to click on the second keyframe, and I'm going to make sure I'm on my free transform tool here. So this one here with the box and the arrow, and I'm just going to slide this down so we can see it bigger. You'll notice that this box comes around it with all these little squares. And for the first one here, I'm just going to deal with scale. So I'm going to hold Shift for this first one and go to the corner here. So I have this double arrow, and this allows me to change the scale of my text. Now, if I didn't hold Shift, then I could end up doing this, which I'm going to show you next. So by holding Shift and doing this, you can maintain the aspect ratio. So I'm just going to make this one bigger and move it up there, and you can see that it now animates it from a small t to a big T. For the R here, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to go to, you can do it from the corner here, so you can squash and stretch from the corner, but I'm just going to go from one of these side ones. So you can see I can just squash it in like that, and I'm going to move this one down. So now we can see that that one squishes and transforms there. So on the A, I'm going to show you rotation. So if you go to the corner, you'll get this curvy thing, and you can just rotate the letter around, and it's going to rotate around this white dot here. So I'm just going to move that kind of up there. And if we go to the N, I'm going to do the same thing. But if you notice, I've moved the N's rotation point. So I moved it over to the corner here. So now when I go to the corner of N and rotate it, it's going to rotate around that dot. So I'm going to rotate it here and move over. You can see that the A rotates around the middle, whereas the N rotates around this bottom corner here. If I click on the S, I'm just going to show you how to skew it. So if you actually go on one of the lines, you can just click and skew it. So it just like deforms it like this. And you can see that one just skews it like that. For the F, I'm just going to show you that you can flip it if you want. So if you go to one of these side ones and you just go beyond the middle, you can flip it to be kind of backwards. So I'll just move this down. And if we watch that one, you'll see that it'll flip around almost like a spinning effect. And then for these last three letters, so for the O, the R, and the M, I'm going to show you different ones over here. So under Properties, if you go down here under Frame, you can go to Color Effects. And right now it's none, but I'm going to change this one to Brightness. So if you click on Brightness, you can now change how light or dark the letter can get. So I'm just going to darken the O. So if we watch it, it goes from regular to darker. And again, I'm just going to, move it up over here. For the R, I'm going to go down to that again. So under Frame, down to Color Effects, I'm going to change Tint. And in this case, I'm going to, sure, if you want to change color, you can just click on this and pick a color. I'm going to keep that yellow, but you can also adjust these sliders if you want as well. And I'm going to move this one kind of down here again. So now we watch that. It'll change color as it moves. And then for the last one here, I'm just going to change the alpha. So if we go down here again and Color Effects to alpha, this is what you would do if you want to fade in or fade out with your text. So if I click on alpha, we can see that I've dropped it. This is 100%, so that's completely, you can see the letter, or you can drop it down to 0, which is see-through, which means that now if you watch it, this would be how you'd like fade out your text. And if we flipped it, so if I now went and clicked on that dot and went down here and cranked up the alpha at the end, but at the start, I clicked on the keyframe and dropped my color effects, my alpha down to 0 at the start, that's how you could fade in your text as well. All right, next up we have filters. And as you can see, I've already broken all the letters apart again. I've distributed each letter to its own layer over here. And I've added a classic tween to the first frame for each of the letters right here. Now, for filters, what I would suggest is you apply the filter before you add new keyframes, before you apply your destination. So I'm just going to go back to the selection tool, and I'm going to go to the F first. So I'm going to deal with the F first. And as you can see, you don't have to break it apart to apply filters. And then I'm going to go over to Properties. And just under Frame, I'm going to go down here to the very, very bottom where it says Filters. And I'm just going to go plus. So for each of these letters for filters, I'm going to apply a different one of these things. Okay, so the first one's going to be Drop Shadow. I'm going to go to the next one here, and I'm going to add Blur, and then so on. Okay, then I'm going to go over to 2 seconds and just highlight all of these, and then add the keyframe in there. And as you can see, it's a white dot now here. and a white dot here, but I have not animated anything yet, right? So I'm gonna leave the first keyframe for all of them as the original, like just the base, like whatever the filter was, and I'm only gonna adjust these ones over here, okay? So for F, I'm just gonna go over here now and we can see the drop shadow one that I added. That filter has a bunch of options. And really it's pretty simple. You're just gonna mess around with each filter here to get something different. So I'm gonna go through each one really quick, but you should obviously mess with it a little bit more. So I'm gonna blur this one out. If you see that blur X was making it wider and blur Y was blurring it up and down, I'm gonna increase my strength. I want it to be a little bit darker. And I'm also gonna move the distance away. So it looks like that. So it looks more like it's kind of floating. And then I'm actually also going to move the letter a little bit again. And you can see that if we watch that one back, it almost looks like it's popping out from the stage, right? It's kind of a cool effect there to make the F kind of pop out like that to have the drop shadow. And obviously if you want, you can change the color and do some other stuff here. Like if you click knockout, it's just the shadow, like wherever it's cut out there. You can do an inner shadow, so it's on the inside, but none of these other ones I don't think look that great. Hide object is gonna be just the shadow. And then here you can change the quality, if you want a low quality one, or if you want to bump it up to high to make the shadow a higher quality resolution. And so it just looks even better back there. Okay, next up on the eye, I'm going to slide down here and we have our blur one. There's not much to do on that one. Right now you can see that the automatic one is blur at 4. I'm just going to switch to high just so we can see it even better. And really the same as the drop shadow one. If you do the blur like X, it's going to blur out to the left and the right. And blur Y is up and down. And you can just see that right here at the start, it was already blurred a little bit because that was the preset. When I push play, it's gonna blur out even more. For L, we have glow, and I'm not gonna go through this stuff again. I'm just gonna slide it over a little bit so you can see that the glow kind of appears around there. For this one, I'm gonna increase the strength so you can really see it, somewhere around there. And I'm gonna change the color to something more like bright so you can see the glow kind of goes around it. And kind of the same thing here. You can change it to an inner glow, and then you can also do knockout where it's just the shadow as well. And then again, you can switch this from low quality to high. I'm just going to take out inner glow so we can see that for that one, it goes from no glow to, a glow on the outside. For the T, we have bevel, and there's a few more things to deal with for that one. So the first thing I would suggest is going to your type and choosing what type. Is it going to be an outer bevel, full bevel? So I'm just going to do inner. And again, knockout is so you just see the bevel part, and you can choose what colors that you want here for shadow and highlights. I'm just going to keep it at black and white. So this time when we blur X, you can see that it kind of shifts how much on the inside kind of bevels there. And then the distance, kind of the same as the drop shadow, you can increase kind of the boldness of it by doing that. And then you can also increase the strength as well. So how much contrast goes between this side, like the shadow side, and the highlight side. And you can change the angle. So if you want to switch it so it's on the other side like that, you can just change the angle right here by clicking and sliding. Next up, we have the E, and that's going to be the gradient glow. This one I would never use. It's just crazy. So I'm going to put a little blur again on the back. I'm going to move the distance so we can see it. You're just clicking into this gradient. And if you double click on this side, then you can pick, just one click, you can pick a color, and that'll be the outer glow of the kind of drop shadow, I guess, of the glow. And on this side is going to be the color that's on the inside. So I'm going to pick maybe a blue, and that's pretty much it. So we didn't really watch the bevel animation. So kind of watch both of these two this time, and you can see the bevel kind of shows up right there. And then for this one, that kind of weird gradient glow drop shadow thing appears on this one. Just kind of a weird effect. Okay, for the R, we have the gradient bevel. Same kind of thing. This one's kind of just like an extreme version of this one. So again, I'm just going to increase these so we can get a sense of what we're dealing with here. And this time on the inside here, you're dealing with this gradient. So instead of the gradient being kind of on the drop shadow, now it's going to be within that bevel. So you can, add that to your text. And if we watch that one, again, you can just see it goes from kind of nothing to a little bit rounded with some, like whatever colors you're going to pick there. It looks kind of weird. Okay, and then the last one is S. and that's going to be to adjust color. This one's pretty obvious. If you, sort of like what we did with the other one up here for color effects, you can also do it here. So you can change the brightness, darken it, brighten it. You can change the hue, which is the color that it kind of goes to. And, contrast is kind of a brightness thing as well. And then saturation, kind of how much of that color. And now we watch it goes from that red and just transfers to that kind of bright, kind of non-contrasty, non-saturated S. And then the last thing you need to know for filters is you can also just pile on more. So on this F, I'm just gonna pile on a couple more. So if I click at the end here and go down, I can add any of the other ones. So on that one, I'm just gonna add maybe a bevel to it. And you can see that now the bevel is also added. So we're gonna have two kind of menus here to mess with. So I'll just kind of play with that a little bit. And you can also go and do any of the other things. So you can also go to your free transform and rotate it and skew it and all of that stuff. Plus you can go to color effects and let's say apply an alpha to make it, see-through or whatever to fade out. So now we have kind of a whole bunch of things happening to that F at the same time. And that's it. That's all I got for animating with the text tool in Adobe Animate for now. If you got something out of this video, make sure to drop a like. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I'll catch you next time.